Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis, 14 years of love, and the hidden truth behind a breakup the world thought was peaceful. They looked perfect from the outside, but behind the quiet life in the south of France was a secret both of them carried in silence. A secret born in Paris in 1998 and ending with a wound neither ever fully spoke about. And now, we're going to uncover every layer of that truth. Before their paths crossed, Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis were living in two completely different worlds. Yet both carried a quiet emptiness that would later make their connection feel inevitable. Johnny entered the 1990s as one of Hollywood's most magnetic rising stars, but the fame only hid a lifetime of wounds he had never learned to name. He grew up in a home ruled by chaos, a mother whose rage could turn any object into a weapon, a father who disappeared emotionally long before he physically left, and a young boy who learned too early that survival meant silence. By age 11, Johnny was already taking his mother's nerve pills, first out of curiosity, then out of need, because the one thing he couldn't escape was the constant throb of fear inside his chest. As he moved into adulthood, his relationships reflected the same instability he had known as a child. He fell in love fast, deeply, desperately, hoping each time that this person would be the one who finally made life feel safe. He was engaged multiple times, searching for something real, but always ending up with the same sense of imbalance. Even at the height of his success, Johnny carried a kind of emotional homelessness, a feeling that no amount of fame or romance could quiet. Vanessa Paradis grew up differently. She became a star in France at just 14, her fame exploding almost overnight. She wasn't running from a violent past like Johnny. She was learning to navigate a life in which millions of eyes followed her every step. Despite the spotlight, Vanessa remained deeply private. She protected her inner world with a calm, almost mysterious softness, rarely speaking about her personal life, rarely letting anyone close enough to see her vulnerability. Success didn't shield her from loneliness, it intensified it. She later described having years of solitude, not because she lacked admirers, but because she longed for someone truly grounded, someone who wouldn't be intimidated by her fame or consume her quietness. Two people, two different scars. Johnny needed someone gentle enough to soothe the chaos he had carried since childhood. Vanessa needed someone genuine enough to make her feel less alone inside the world her fame had built around her. Long before they met in Paris, their emotional trajectories were already moving toward each other, one shaped by darkness, the other shaped by silence. Paris has a way of rearranging people's lives without warning, and for Johnny Depp, it happened in a single glance. In 1998, he was in the city filming The Ninth Gate, surrounded by colleagues, exhaustion, cigarette smoke, and the kind of late-night conversations that blur into each other. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't expecting anything. But then he turned his head, just slightly, and saw the back of a woman sitting at a nearby table. Not her face, not her voice, just her back. Johnny would later say that in that exact second, something inside him shifted. My life as a single man was done, he recalled, like an instinct older than reason had taken over. Her posture was elegant but unguarded, the curve of her neck soft, almost fragile, and when she finally turned and he caught her eyes across the room, he felt a pull he couldn't explain. It wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense. It was recognition, as if he had been waiting for a stranger he somehow already knew. What Johnny didn't know was that Vanessa Paradis had met him once before, and she had never forgotten him. In 1993, at the Viper Room in Los Angeles, she had walked in with friends, and Johnny, then the owner of the club, had simply reached out and shaken her hand. No flirtation, no performance, just a gentle, genuine gesture. And yet, Vanessa felt something click. Okay, that's it, she remembered thinking. He made a big impression on her, soft-spoken, sincere, unlike the chaotic image Hollywood had painted around him. During the years that followed, she continued her life, her work, her solitude, but the memory of that brief moment lingered in the background of her mind. So when they crossed paths again in Paris, 5 years later, something quiet but undeniable completed its circle. Johnny didn't approach her with lines or charm. He simply walked over, pulled out a chair, and sat down as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Conversation flowed easily. No masks. No pressure. She laughed softly. He listened intently. Friends around them faded into insignificance. Paris shrank into a single table, a single moment. There are meetings that feel accidental, and then there are meetings that feel written. Within hours, everyone around them could sense it. The spark, the gravity, the shift. Johnny and Vanessa weren't falling in love. They were recognizing a connection that had been waiting to resurface. In the quiet glow of a Paris night, two people from opposite emotional worlds, one shaped by shadows, one shaped by silence, found themselves moving toward each other with the ease of something predestined. They didn't know it yet, but that night would ignite a love story that would change both of their lives for the next 14 years. What began in Paris as a quiet spark quickly erupted into a love that neither Johnny nor Vanessa saw coming. It wasn't dramatic or showy. It moved with the natural force of something meant to be. Within days, they were inseparable. Within weeks, they were building a rhythm that felt strangely familiar, as if they had been partners far longer than the calendar suggested. And then, just 3 months after they officially began dating, Vanessa discovered she was pregnant. There was no panic, no hesitation, no fear, only clarity. For Johnny, whose life had been a constant swirl of fame, noise, instability, and emotional residue from a bruised childhood, the news hit like a revelation. He'd spent decades drifting from one intense romance to another, always giving too much, never receiving enough, yet never truly finding the center of gravity he so desperately needed. Vanessa, with her gentle steadiness, had already begun grounding him. But the idea of becoming a father shifted something deeper. When I held my daughter for the first time, it was like a veil lifted, he would later say, a layer of fog removed. The moment Lily Rose entered the world, Johnny described feeling clarity for the first time in his adult life. He no longer saw himself as the wounded boy from a violent home or the troubled young actor trying to numb old scars. He saw himself as a protector, a caretaker, someone finally responsible for a life more important than his own. Vanessa experienced the whirlwind differently. She had always been composed, guarded, used to controlling her environment after years of fame. But with Johnny, she allowed herself softness, something rare for a woman who had learned early on that the public devours vulnerability. His tenderness surprised her. His sincerity disarmed her. She once said that he never left her thoughts in those years before Paris, and now, living beside him, she understood why. The birth of their daughter only deepened her sense of belonging. For the first time in years, Vanessa didn't feel alone inside her success. She felt anchored by family, by love, by the quiet domestic world they were starting to build together. Their life quickly shifted away from Hollywood chaos and towards something more intimate. Late nights with a newborn, quiet mornings in the French countryside, long conversations about the kind of parents they wanted to be. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And for Johnny, it was transformative. The man who once ran from his own past now found himself running toward the future, with Vanessa beside him and their daughter in his arms. It was the beginning of a 14-year chapter that neither fame nor distance nor heartbreak could ever erase. When Johnny and Vanessa chose to settle in the south of France, it wasn't a strategic move. It was an escape, a quiet rebellion against everything Hollywood demanded of them. In that small village, far from flashing cameras and suffocating headlines, they found something neither had truly known before: peace. Real, ordinary, domestic peace. Their home was a blend of simplicity and warmth. Uneven stone walls, windows opening to lavender fields, the smell of bread from the local bakery drifting in at dawn. It was the opposite of Johnny's chaotic childhood and the opposite of Vanessa's suffocating fame. In that environment, they both softened. They both healed. Johnny became a man few expected him to be: calm, grounded, present. He cooked breakfast for the kids. He walked to the market like any other father. He spent long afternoons painting or playing guitar in the garden while Lily Rose and Jack ran barefoot around the property. He often said that France saved him, but in truth, it was Vanessa who created the world where he finally felt safe. Vanessa thrived in the slowness. She worked on her music and films at her own pace, not under the pressure of American schedules or entertainment gossip. She could walk the streets without being chased, sit at a cafe without whispers. The French countryside didn't see her as a celebrity. They saw her as a mother, a partner, a neighbor. Together, They built a life defined by balance. Space to work, space to breathe, space to grow, and most importantly, space to trust. Vanessa once said something that captured their relationship perfectly. We must give each other space if we want our love to continue. It wasn't distance in a cold sense. It was freedom. The freedom to be individuals within a couple. The freedom to leave, knowing the other would still be there. Johnny, whose past had tied love to fear and abandonment, found comfort in that trust. Vanessa, whose life had been scrutinized since adolescence, found comfort in that respect. Their children remained at the center of everything. Privacy was sacred. When paparazzi crossed boundaries, Johnny's warning, "I'll bite your nose off," wasn't a joke. It was a man protecting the life he fought hard to build. He had known instability. He refused to let his kids grow up in it. On red carpets, they were magnetic, a rock and roll poet and a French muse, effortlessly stylish, effortlessly connected. But it was in the quiet moments, away from cameras, where their bond truly lived. Late-night conversations on the terrace, shared cigarettes under the stars, the comfort of silence between two people who didn't need to perform for each other. To the world, they looked unbreakable. To their friends, they looked destined. And for a long time, it truly seemed that nothing could shake the life they had built, until the cracks began to appear in ways no one could see from the outside. From the outside, Johnny and Vanessa looked like they had mastered the impossible, balancing fame, family, and love without letting the world intrude. But beneath the calm surface of their French sanctuary, slow and subtle cracks began to form. They weren't dramatic at first. They were the kind of fractures that start with schedules, grow with exhaustion, and deepen with misunderstandings neither side wants to admit. Johnny's career exploded during the 2000s. Blockbusters, global tours, months spent on set. His chaotic nature, the same energy that charmed millions, pulled him across continents. He would disappear into characters for months at a time, long enough for the rhythms of home to shift around his absence. Vanessa understood the industry. She had lived in it longer than him. But understanding doesn't erase loneliness. And slowly, inevitably, they began living on parallel tracks rather than crossing ones. Then came The Tourist in 2010, and with it, the rumors. Johnny starring opposite Angelina Jolie was enough to ignite tabloid hysteria. Most of it was exaggerated, some entirely fabricated, but the effects were real. Reports claimed Vanessa didn't want him to take the role because of the intimate scenes. Others insisted she was uncomfortable with Angelina's magnetic reputation. The truth was more nuanced. Vanessa wasn't jealous. She was tired. Tired of the distance. Tired of being the anchor while Johnny drifted between worlds. And while Johnny did request that one of the sex scenes be toned down, he said it was for artistic reasons, not because of relationship tension. But in relationships, perception often hurts more than truth. The more the media speculated, the more the couple withdrew from the public eye, retreating deeper into silence. By 2011, cracks turned into a quiet, constant pressure. Friends noticed Johnny seemed restless, not unhappy, but unsettled, as if he couldn't sit still in his own life. Some claimed he wanted out. Others believed Vanessa felt her identity slowly dissolving behind years of compromise and family devotion, longing to refocus on her career. A pattern emerged. Two people still deeply connected, but struggling to stay aligned as their worlds pulled them in opposite directions. When Johnny appeared alone at the Golden Globes in early 2012, whispers turned to certainty. Soon after, the announcement came. They had amicably separated. But amicable didn't mean painless. Johnny later admitted he tried to numb himself because the breakup was excruciating. 14 years is not something you walk away from untouched. Vanessa, guarded as ever, refused to let tabloids profit from her suffering. In an interview with French Elle, she asked, "Can you imagine what it feels like to see people making a business out of your pain?" She also hinted that their problems had existed from the beginning, suggesting that love alone wasn't always enough to create happiness. A painful truth many couples learn too late. Then came one of the strangest accusations. The claim that Vanessa was horrible to Johnny's mother, Betty Sue. It came from Heather Rassel, embroiled in her own messy divorce from Johnny's nephew. She blamed Vanessa for the breakup, calling her a total bitch. But nothing about the story aligned with the truth. Betty Sue never publicly spoke against Vanessa. And Johnny, who had a deeply complicated and traumatic relationship with his mother, was unlikely to end a 14-year partnership over such a claim. Still, rumors have weight, and weight adds pressure. And pressure breaks even the strongest structures. By mid-2012, the foundation that once seemed unshakable had quietly collapsed, not from scandal, not from betrayal, but from years of distance, emotional fatigue, and two people evolving in ways that no longer fit together. To understand why a love as steady and devoted as Johnny and Vanessa's could still collapse, you have to go back, not to Paris, not to Hollywood, but to the house Johnny Depp grew up in. Long before films and fame, before the tattoos and the guitars, he was a little boy living in a home ruled by fear. And that fear shaped everything that came after, including the way he loved. Johnny has never sugarcoated his childhood. He described his mother, Betty Sue, as the meanest human being I've ever met. She swung between unpredictable anger and sudden violence. One moment she was quiet, the next she could be throwing an ashtray across the room, or the phone, or anything she could grab. Johnny learned early to stay silent, stay small, stay invisible. His father, emotionally absent, walked out when Johnny was still young, leaving him with the message that even the people you depend on most can disappear without warning. At 11 years old, Johnny discovered his mother's nerve pills. She asked him to fetch them so often that one day, he tried one himself. For the first time, the storm inside him calmed. That moment, an 11-year-old boy self-medicating, was the first step of a long dependency on substances that followed him into adulthood. He didn't take them to rebel. He took them to breathe. This is the part people often overlook when examining his relationship with Vanessa. Johnny did not enter this love story as a blank canvas. He came carrying years of emotional survival tactics, ways of coping that once saved him but later worked against him. When he met Vanessa, she became the first person who made him feel safe without needing to escape into roles, alcohol, or Hollywood noise. That's why he often said, meeting Vanessa changed everything. She didn't fix him. She softened him. She didn't heal his past. She made the present livable. But trauma is not something you outrun. It resurfaces when pressure builds. It resurfaces when distance grows. It resurfaces when fear of abandonment, deeply planted in childhood, returns in adult form. During their years together, Johnny genuinely transformed. Friends said he became more nurturing, more stable, more patient. He devoted himself to fatherhood precisely because he knew what it felt like to grow up without emotional safety. He vowed his own children would never feel what he felt. And by all accounts, he succeeded. Both Lily Rose and Jack speak of him with warmth, affection, and pride. But the ghosts of his childhood didn't disappear, they just quieted down. And when his relationship with Vanessa entered a difficult phase, those ghosts woke back up. The growing distance between them, career pressures, physical separation, emotional fatigue, triggered familiar patterns. Feeling unanchored, feeling inadequate, feeling the old fear that he might lose the only true sanctuary he'd ever built. Instead of confronting those feelings, Johnny did what he had done since he was a boy. He tried to numb them. He admitted he drank more, felt more disoriented, tried to shut off the noise inside his head. Meanwhile, Vanessa, despite her strength and elegance, could not carry the emotional weight of both people forever. She loved him deeply, but love does not erase someone's childhood scars. Love can hold someone together for a long time, but it cannot be a permanent substitute for healing. In the end, their breakup wasn't caused by infidelity or betrayal. It came from something quieter, more tragic. Two people reaching the limits of what they could give while still fighting their own invisible battles. Johnny once said that his childhood made him a more nurturing person. And maybe that's true, but it also made him a man fighting shadows no one else could see. And eventually, even a love as steady as his and Vanessa's couldn't outrun those shadows forever. By the time the world learned that Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis had amicably separated, the real heartbreak had already happened, quietly, privately, long before the headlines. Their breakup wasn't a sudden explosion. It was erosion, a slow, steady wearing down of two people who still loved each other, but could no longer survive inside the same emotional space. Johnny described those months as excruciating, admitting he tried to numb himself just to get through each day. For a man who had survived a traumatic childhood, heartbreak hit him in a way most people couldn't see. He wasn't just losing a partner. He was losing the one place in his adult life that had felt safe, stable, and real. The family he built with Vanessa was the exact opposite of the chaos he grew up in. Letting it go felt like repeating a pain he had sworn never to relive. For Vanessa, the suffering was quieter but no less intense. She refused to let tabloids turn her private grief into entertainment. When French Elle pressed her about the breakup, she responded with a sentence that revealed everything in its restraint. Can you imagine what it feels like to see people making a business out of your pain? She didn't cry publicly. She didn't accuse anyone. She simply drew a line. But between the lines, her exhaustion showed. She hinted that she and Johnny had struggled from the beginning, suggesting that love, no matter how deep, sometimes coexists with unhappiness. A rare admission for a woman known for silence. During this time, tabloids threw gasoline on every rumor they could invent. The most ridiculous was the claim that Vanessa had been horrible to Johnny's mother, Betty Sue. The accusation came from Heather Rassel, embroiled in her own divorce, and lacked any grounding in reality. Betty Sue never publicly criticized Vanessa, and those close to the family denied the story outright. But in Hollywood, truth rarely matters as much as narrative. And the narrative that year was simple. Something had broken, and outsiders wanted someone to blame. Yet the real reason was far more human. Distance, emotional fatigue, two careers pulling in different directions, and the resurfacing of old wounds neither fully understood. In the months leading up to the breakup, Johnny became increasingly absent, physically and emotionally. Vanessa, after years of prioritizing family, felt the urge to revive her career, regain her independence, find her own voice again. Their once perfect rhythm no longer aligned. Days apart turned into weeks. Conversations turned into misunderstandings. What had once felt effortless now required energy neither of them had left. The moment Johnny walked the Golden Globes red carpet alone, the world sensed the truth. Shortly after, the official statement was released. They thanked each other. They protected their children. They refused to let bitterness poison 14 years of history. Still, the emotional cost was heavy. Johnny admitted he was lost for a while. Vanessa retreated into work. Their children, Lily Rose and Jack, felt the shift even if protected from the details. But something remarkable happened in the aftermath. They didn't turn into enemies. They didn't wage war in the press. They didn't rewrite their story to hurt each other. Even in separation, their instinct was loyalty. Years later, Johnny summed it up with a simple truth. You don't abandon ship. Not when you've had a couple of kids and a woman who's been good to you. So you keep loving, even if it changes. Their love story didn't end with betrayal. It ended with two people choosing honesty over pretending, choosing peace over resentment, choosing family over drama. And sometimes, that kind of ending is the hardest one of all. The true measure of a relationship is not how it begins, but what remains after it ends. And in the case of Johnny Depp and Vanessa Paradis, what remained was something rare in Hollywood: dignity, loyalty, and a bond that refused to rot into bitterness. Their love may have ended as a romance, but it did not disappear. It evolved. After the breakup, the world expected drama. Public feuds, custody battles, accusations. Instead, Johnny and Vanessa chose an entirely different path. They stayed a family. Friends recall that Johnny continued visiting Vanessa and their children whenever he could. On more than one occasion, he even spent Christmas with Vanessa and her new husband, Samuel Benchetrit. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was simply the natural continuation of a connection that had never relied on labels to feel real. Johnny spoke often about Vanessa with unmistakable warmth. She's a great mom and a great woman. We're on good terms. Very good terms. There was no hesitation in his voice when he said it. No bitterness. Only gratitude. For Vanessa, the priority after the breakup remained the same as during the relationship: protect the children. Lily Rose and Jack had grown up sheltered from scandal, and their parents made sure that continued. The stability they received stands in stark contrast to Johnny's own childhood: chaotic, violent, unpredictable. It's one of the great ironies of their story. Even if Johnny and Vanessa couldn't save their relationship, they successfully built the stable home he never had. Lily Rose blossomed into a rising actress, moving between French and American cinema, becoming a Chanel ambassador, and building a career that reflects both her parents' artistic instincts. Jack stayed away from the spotlight, but his father proudly revealed he was gifted in drawing and music, creative, introspective, quietly talented. Johnny's voice always softened when he spoke about his son. "I couldn't be more proud." Their children are, in many ways, the clearest proof of the love that once existed between Johnny and Vanessa. They grew up safe. They grew up loved. And they grew up with two parents who never allowed their personal heartbreak to become a generational wound. And then there is the emotional legacy, something harder to measure but impossible to ignore. For Johnny, Vanessa was the anchor in a life filled with storms. She gave him a decade of peace he had never known before. She softened a man who had spent childhood bracing for impact. She helped him become the father he always wanted to be. Even years later, when reflecting on his life, Johnny returned to one simple truth. Meeting Vanessa changed everything. For Vanessa, Johnny was the rare presence who understood the contradictions of fame, the isolation beneath the applause, the longing beneath the glamour. With him, she had 2 children, built a home, and lived a life far from the noise she had spent her career escaping. Their story didn't end the way fairy tales do, but it left her with a family, stability, and a friendship unbroken by time. Some love stories end with a door slamming. Theirs ended with a light dimming, quietly, painfully, gently. But the light never fully went out. 14 years together left something permanent. 2 children, a lifelong friendship, and the kind of respect that even time cannot erode. Their romance may have ended, but their legacy, tender, complicated, human, endures.